In every confrontation, most people do one of two things. They either explode or they shrink. But what if you could remain absolutely calm, unshaken, and even more powerful in the face of attack? This isn't about controlling your emotions. It's about mastering perception, silence, and fear itself. Today, you'll learn how kings have won wars without raising their voices. In the architecture of power, silence is not the absence of speech. It is the presence of strategy. The man who rules by words alone is a man whose crown rests upon trembling foundations, easily toppled by louder voices or sharper tongues. But the one who learns to govern through silence, intentional, controlled, penetrating silence, he builds a throne within the minds of men where no hand can reach. In confrontation, the average man lunges for speech. He arms himself with arguments, sharpens his voice into a sword, and enters the battlefield thinking volume will conquer doubt, that haste will protect pride. But this is the behavior of those who are ruled by fear of being misunderstood, fear of being humiliated, fear of losing position. It is the noise of the insecure. The calm man, no, the calculating man, does not need such noise. His silence is not ignorance nor hesitation. It is surveillance. It is the quiet of one who is already above the battle, watching pawns move beneath his feet. He knows that the one who listens, who waits, who breathes before speaking, creates tension in the minds of all who watch. And power, in its purest form, is the ability to make others uneasy without lifting a finger. Silence destabilizes. It provokes curiosity. It shifts control. In any confrontation, the side that controls the rhythm of the exchange controls the perception of dominance. The man who does not react quickly is not seen as weak. He is feared as unpredictable. His restraint suggests depth. His stillness hints at knowledge that others do not possess. When everyone expects you to raise your voice, and instead you raise your eyebrow, you do not lower the temperature. You raise the stakes. Understand this. Confrontation is a ritual as old as war, and in rituals, symbols matter more than substance. The man who remains composed becomes a symbol of power, of discipline, of detachment. Detachment, especially, is the greatest illusion of control. When others see you detached from the heat of the moment, they assume you are above it, superior to it, immune to its consequences. And from this assumption, they lower their weapons not because you struck first, but because they wonder if striking you at all is even possible. The silent man creates space, and in that space, the others fill the void with their own mistakes. Words spoken in haste are rarely wise. The more they speak, the more they reveal. The more they try to explain, defend, or accuse, the more they expose themselves. A king, then, is not made by the strength of his argument, but by the weakness of his opponent's unraveling. And the master of silence allows the other man to unravel entirely, while he himself sits motionless, untouched by the storm. Even in ancient courts, where counsel was demanded and advisors were many, the true rulers were those who spoke the least and yet commanded the most. Their presence was felt more than their voice was heard. Their silences became scripture. Others interpreted their meaning with reverence or fear. In every pause, others projected what they feared or hoped to hear. This is the art of rule, to speak less and be understood more, to say little and mean everything, to make others believe they are heard while you remain unreadable. In practical terms, silence gives you leverage. It forces the other to fill the space with their thoughts, their emotions, their impulses. The one who holds silence holds the pace. He dictates when tension rises, when release occurs. In moments of attack or accusation, the calm man who responds with a moment of breath, a gaze, a pause, A slight tilt of the head creates a dissonance in the attacker's rhythm. That dissonance breeds doubt, and doubt is the seed of retreat. Moreover, silence has a way of exposing intentions. When you do not interrupt, do not counter, do not react, the true aim of your adversary begins to bleed through their words. If they seek power, they reveal it. If they seek weakness in you, their gaze betrays them. By remaining silent, you do not compete in their game, you observe it. You rise above the surface of their performance. While they continue to dance on a stage you no longer stand on. Silence is also the highest form of discipline. It is proof that you do not need to defend yourself to preserve your power. The one who defends constantly is either guilty or afraid. The one who does not speak until he must is never suspected, only watched. And he who is watched carefully without understanding becomes a source of anxiety for all around him. That anxiety becomes authority. Even in defeat, silence holds dignity. The man who retreats with grace, without begging, without explanation, keeps more power than the one who screams in protest or demands justice. Because silence implies choice, and choice implies control. And in a world where most are controlled by reactions, the one who controls his voice controls the perception of his soul. In every confrontation, the first instinct of ordinary men is to express. They reveal their anger, their fear, their disappointment. They believe foolishly that to be authentic is to be powerful, but a ruler understands that expression is a trap. The moment you show your emotion, you expose the coordinates of your inner fortress. You tell the enemy exactly where to strike. A man's emotions are not private when they are shown. They become tools for others to shape, exploit, and provoke. Those who cannot control their own expressions become pawns in games they do not even realize they are playing. If you wish to endure conflict and emerge with dignity and control, then your emotions must become invisible to those who would use them against you. In the theater of power, the man who controls emotion is not the one who feels nothing, but the one who knows when to hide what he feels. The clever ruler studies the emotions of others, not his own. He reads them like maps. He listens not to the words, but to the breath behind them. He watches the eyes, the tension in the shoulders, the slight hesitation before a lie. Every emotional leak from another man is intelligence. It is an unguarded gate, but he himself reveals none. If his opponent shouts, he listens. If his opponent accuses, he observes. If his opponent trembles, he waits, because each reaction from the other side is like watching a ship lose its sails. The storm will break them before the confrontation ends. All the king must do is remain steady and let the wind do the work. When you show anger, you tell your enemy that they have reached you. When you show fear, you give them proof of their power. When you show desperation, you hand them the crown without a word. And yet most people do all three, willingly, eagerly, thinking they are asserting truth. But truth in war means nothing. Only control matters. To win is not to be right. It is to be unreadable, to be composed, to let the other man burn himself trying to set you on fire. A great confrontation is not won by shouting louder. It is won by making the other man shout first. The moment he loses composure, he is no longer dangerous. He becomes predictable. He becomes a slave to the very emotion he wished to weaponize against you. If he is angry, he will make hasty decisions. If he is insulted, he will seek vengeance instead of strategy. If he is jealous, he will overreach. And each time he does, you grow stronger not by doing more, but by doing less. Emotion, when used with precision, can be a weapon, but only if it is aimed at others, not released from within you. The ruler knows how to provoke others. He does so with small gestures, subtle glances, a few carefully chosen words. He strikes at their insecurities, not with rage, but with silence. He exposes their fears by remaining still. He destabilizes their minds not by roaring, but by refusing to react at all. A king who allows emotion to lead him loses the loyalty of those around him. His men begin to question his steadiness, his enemies smell blood, even his allies begin to distance themselves, sensing volatility. People follow certainty, not honesty. They obey strength, not vulnerability. The strong man is not the one who never feels, but the one who never bleeds in public. Even when his heart races, the ruler breathes. Even when his hands sweat, he keeps them folded. Even when he is enraged, he speaks with calm clarity, measuring each word like gold weighed on a scale. He understands that in battle, the man who speaks too quickly often speaks his own defeat. There is a reason why statues of kings are carved in stone with emotionless faces. Because power is not frantic, it is composed, it is heavy, it does not dance or shout, it simply stands, and others move around it. The man who leads with emotion becomes a storm without direction. He may frighten in the moment, but he never lasts. Because fear fades, anger burns out, and desperation poisons trust. But the man who governs his emotions becomes a wall others cannot climb. He is not immune to feeling, he simply refuses to let it steer him. And in confrontation, when all eyes are watching, when voices rise and tempers flare, the man who remains calm becomes the center of gravity. He becomes the judge without speaking a verdict. Others begin to adjust their behavior to his mood, his silence, his rhythm. They begin to fear that he knows something they do not, that he has a plan they cannot see, that he has already won before they began to fight. In every confrontation, there is an invisible battlefield before a single word is spoken. This battlefield is not defined by swords or arguments. It is defined by the frame. The frame is the psychological territory in which the interaction occurs. It is the hidden stage on which the confrontation is performed, and it determines who is dominant and who is reacting. The one who defines the frame is the one who controls the outcome because he determines the rules, the focus, and the emotional terms. And once the terms are set, the other has already lost, whether he knows it or not. The common man reacts within the frame given to him. If accused, he defends. If provoked, he strikes. If disrespected, he pleads for respect. But all these are reactions, responses to someone else's design. The man who allows another to define the terms of engagement, even subconsciously, enters the conflict already kneeling. He has accepted the other's authority without realizing it. His posture becomes a silent admission of inferiority, not because he lacks power, but because he surrendered the terrain on which power is measured. The ruler never accepts the enemy's battlefield. He never fights where he is told to. He creates a new field, a field of his own choosing, where he is already prepared, already comfortable, already dominant. And he does this not by force, but by shifting the frame. When someone insults him, he does not respond with insult. He questions the purpose behind the insult. When someone demands an answer, he questions the premise of the question. When someone seeks an emotional reaction, he answers with an intellectual pause. In doing so, he does not merely avoid the trap, he moves the entire structure of the confrontation. The other party becomes disoriented, confused, destabilized. They expected fire and were met with stone. They wanted noise and were given silence, and in that shift, they lose their footing. Controlling the frame is not about speaking more. It is about changing what is being spoken about. A man who is accused and rushes to defend himself enters the frame of guilt and justification. But the man who responds with indifference or shifts the subject entirely controls where attention flows. He understands that perception is not based on truth, but on control. If he can steer the focus, he can steer the conclusion. People believe not what is said loudest, but what is repeated and reinforced with presence. And nothing reinforces more than calm authority. To control the frame is also to decide which emotions are allowed in the space. If the other party wants anger, you give detachment. If they want sympathy, you give ambiguity. If they want fear, you give boredom. In doing so, you deny them what they came for. And in every denial, they shrink, because power is the ability to say no without saying a word. Power is the ability to remain still while others perform around you. Framing is also a social art. The crowd, the witnesses, the onlookers, the silent participants, they do not listen with reason. They observe frames. They decide who won not by what was said, but by who dictated the energy of the moment. The man who looks less rattled, less moved, less eager to prove, is assumed to be in control. Even if his argument is weaker, even if the facts are not on his side, the frame he creates becomes the reality they follow. Because people do not seek truth, they seek leadership, and framing is leadership disguised as poise. The ruler manipulates time and tone to reshape the confrontation itself. If an enemy demands urgency, he slows the moment down. He answers with pauses. He lets silence build weight. He does not fill every space with words. He allows the silence to speak for him. This refusal to rush creates a gravitational pull. The other must either match his pace or appear frantic. And the frantic man, no matter how righteous, always appears weaker. In this game, perception is the currency and attention is the battlefield. By controlling where the attention goes, the ruler decides what matters and what does not. He decides what is real and what is irrelevant. And he does this by framing the moment so carefully that the other cannot breathe without stepping into his architecture. Even questions become traps. Even kindness becomes dominance. Even retreat becomes a form of advance. This is why kings do not explain themselves. Explanation invites doubt. Explanation accepts that the audience has the right to question. But when you frame yourself as unquestionable, you force others to climb the wall before they can even begin the debate. And most people never climb. Even when surrounded by confrontation, the ruler speaks as if he is the one allowing the conversation to continue. His words are measured, but his silences are heavier than any threat. He does not answer accusations. He raises standards. He does not apologize. He redefines the event. He does not resist the pressure. He shifts it, repositions it, and quietly lets it exhaust itself against the frame he never surrendered. Fear is not the enemy of power. It is its companion. Every man who has ruled, truly ruled, has felt fear. But not every man has shown it. The difference between the ruler and the ruled lies not in the presence of fear, but in the management of its display. The powerful do not eliminate fear. They conceal it beneath the folds of command. They do not pretend they are beyond fear. They simply refuse to grant it an audience. When a confrontation erupts, fear moves first. It tightens the breath, quickens the pulse, clouds the judgment. The common man reacts immediately. He speaks too soon, too loudly, or not at all. His body betrays him. His hands tremble, his eyes dart, his voice cracks. And in these betrayals, he relinquishes control. His fear is no longer his own. It is seen, it is noted, it is used. From that moment forward, he is not in command of the room. He is in defense of his weakness. The ruler, however, feels fear like a scientist feels fire. He observes it, measures it, controls its spread. He does not deny its presence, but he ensures it serves him rather than exposes him. His breathing may deepen, but not in panic. In precision, his heart may beat faster, but his face does not show it. His hands may sweat beneath his robes, but the world will never see them uncovered, because he understands that fear, once visible, becomes a signal to predators. It invites escalation. It tells the enemy where to strike. True strength is not the absence of fear. It is the ability to move through confrontation without performing fear. A man may be terrified within, but if he does not mirror that terror in his body or his words, the world is blind to it. And the world cannot conquer what it cannot read. Power depends not on purity, but on illusion, the illusion of certainty, the illusion of immunity, the illusion of impenetrability. The man who commands must become an actor, but not a liar. His composure must be deliberate, not deceptive. He must learn to separate the storm within from the surface without. To remain still while everything inside rages. To speak in calm tones while the mind calculates every possible disaster. He learns that the man who shows fear too early is already a subject, not a sovereign. Because in the eyes of others, fear equals permission. Permission to dominate, to challenge, to invade. Fear is allowed in the mind, but never in the posture. The ruler cultivates stillness in the face, neutrality in the voice, grace in the gestures. Every movement is studied, every word is placed with precision. He never fidgets, never glances nervously, never speaks to fill the silence. Because silence, when occupied by fear, becomes chaos. But silence held by control becomes pressure, a weapon unto itself. Even when threatened, even when surrounded, even when deeply uncertain, the ruler makes fear his private affair. He does not deny its existence, he transforms it into vigilance. While others tremble, he watches. While others shout, he listens. While others act from panic, he calculates his advantage. His fear sharpens him, but never spills over. He wears it like a blade beneath a velvet robe, dangerous but hidden. Most men misunderstand fear. They try to conquer it by pretending it does not exist. They posture, they perform aggression, they overcompensate. But these are symptoms of insecurity, not signs of dominance. The ruler does not need to project the opposite of fear to remain in power. He simply refuses to broadcast it. That is the discipline of command, to feel everything and show nothing. In the architecture of leadership, fear is not a flaw. It is part of the foundation, but the structure must be sound. The king's face must be the last place panic finds shelter. His eyes must be unreadable. His voice must be steady even when his kingdom trembles, because those who follow him borrow their courage from his composure. If they see fear in him, they believe the walls are cracking. But if he appears calm, even in uncertainty, they will hold the line. In war, in politics, in confrontation of any kind, fear is a contagion. It spreads rapidly when detected, but it is powerless when contained. The man who panics first loses his advantage. The one who remains unreadable retains command. That is the true game, not to feel nothing, but to master how your feelings are seen. Even when alone, the ruler disciplines himself. He rehearses silence, holds his breath under tension, trains his voice to remain level. He prepares for public moments in private hours, because the confrontation that will define him may arrive unannounced. And when it does, he must not reach for courage. He must already appear to be its embodiment. Whether or not he feels it is irrelevant. What matters is that others believe he does. To the common man, confrontation is a personal matter, a reaction to insult, a clash of opinions, a spontaneous explosion of emotion. But to the ruler, confrontation is never personal. It is ritual, it is performance, it is theater. And in theater, the one who understands the script, the stage, and the audience always commands the scene. Every confrontation is observed, even when no one is present. The people involved become performers, their words become lines, and their expressions become symbols. The air thickens with tension not because of what is said, but because of how it is said. Most men do not realize they are acting. They speak in the heat of the moment, thinking they are defending honor, asserting truth, or fighting for justice. But they are simply improvising on a stage that someone else built. The ruler never improvises. He studies the entire scene before he steps into it. He knows that the value of a confrontation lies not in winning an argument, but in shaping the perception of strength. It is not the content of his reply that matters. It is the way he replies. It is not what he says. It is how long he waits before saying it. Timing becomes more powerful than tone, presence more important than volume. When people observe a conflict, they do not tally facts. They search for dominance. They look for certainty. They want to know who controls the moment. And control is measured not by how much one says, but by how little one needs to say. The man who appears unaffected gains their favor, their fear, their silent loyalty. The man who overreacts, even if justified, loses their respect. Because perception, not truth, governs power, the ruler appears calm, not because he is indifferent, but because he understands that panic is for peasants. His stillness in the face of aggression becomes a statement. He allows others to reveal their desperation, their volatility, their weakness. Every exaggerated movement from his opponent becomes part of the performance, a tragic display of instability. Meanwhile, he maintains composure, and by doing so, elevates himself above the noise. He becomes not a participant, but the judge of the spectacle. Even when confronted directly, insulted, accused, provoked, the ruler measures his performance. He makes no sudden movements. He does not interrupt. He lets the performance of the other reach its crescendo, because the more the opponent reveals, the more the audience, whether present or implied, begins to shift its sympathy. There is something inherently unstable about a man who must prove himself loudly, and there is something godlike about a man who proves himself by saying nothing at all. The king knows that every confrontation echoes beyond its moment. It is remembered, it is retold, it is transformed into legend or rumor. And what is remembered is not always what happened, but how it looked. Therefore, he dresses for the part, not in clothing, but in composure, in restraint, in the slow, deliberate movements of one who is never surprised, never shaken, never desperate. His enemies may have more weapons, more evidence, more support, but he has gravity, and gravity cannot be manufactured. It must be performed. Even when he chooses to speak, the ruler selects his words like a sculptor selects stone. He knows that too many words weaken the moment. He says less than he could, not because he lacks clarity, but because brevity cloaked in control creates mystery. And mystery is magnetic. The crowd does not follow the man who explains everything, they follow the man who says little, but seems to know everything. In private confrontations, the theater remains. There may be no spectators, but the performance is not for others, it is for memory. Because every powerful man knows that the opponent will relive the moment again and again in his mind, the ruler ensures that what echoes in that memory is not rage, not apology, but calm, deliberate command. He implants doubt in the other's mind not through threats, but through unreadable stillness. He ensures that the opponent leaves wondering whether he misunderstood everything, whether the ruler was stronger than he appeared, whether he himself made a mistake simply by initiating. Conflict, confrontation, for the ruler is never reactive. It is strategic theater. Every gesture has weight. Every pause is loaded with meaning. Every tilt of the head, every breath held just a moment longer than expected, becomes part of the message. And the message is always the same. I am not disturbed. I am not confused. I am in control. The ruler never breaks character, because character is power. It is not about being right. It is about being untouchable. And untouchability is a role that must be rehearsed, mastered, embodied. The audience may be silent, they may be hidden, but they are always watching. The crown is not earned in moments of peace. It is revealed in moments of fire. And in fire, the weak scream, the emotional stumble, the reactive fall to their knees. But the ruler remains still, not because he is immune to the storm, but because he knows how to rule it from within. To stay calm in confrontation is not a gift. It is a skill, a discipline, a weapon. Silence is your armor. Emotion is your tool, not your leash. You do not accept the frame of the enemy. You redraw the battlefield. You feel fear, but you do not display it. You understand that every conflict is a performance, and the audience crowns the one who plays his part without trembling. Let others break themselves trying to provoke you. Let them reveal their intentions, their weaknesses, their noise. You are not there to match their chaos. You are there to become the one thing they cannot shake: stillness with a spine of steel. That is how kings endure, not by overpowering every opponent, but by never letting the opponent see that he was even worth reacting to.